Street bikes, middleweights, all-rounders, whatever you want to call them, that's the class that has become very, very popular lately. Popular because the price is lower than a full-blown super sports bike, but the performance isn't that much different in the real world. And without doubt the one that's done the best is Suzuki's 600 Bandit. But will that change? Well, it just might now that Yamaha have a new weapon. It's called the Fazer. I have to admit that my first impressions of the Fazer were that it looked like a load of old Yamahas stuck together. There certainly seems to be a bit of XJ600 in there, maybe a bit of FJ1200, and one or two other bits and pieces that seem to have been borrowed from previous models. But one thing is for sure, if you covered up all the badges and asked people to name the make, most of them would say it's most definitely a Yamaha. So 10 out of 10 to the design team. The engine too is borrowed from another model. It's the same 600cc inline 4 which powers the Thundercat, and we all know how good that is. It'll produce 95 brake horsepower and take this bike to a top speed of 140 miles per hour. The only big difference is the way the engine is actually mounted in the bike. On the Fazer it's more upright, the Thundercat slopes forward more. Doesn't make much difference, but it has allowed the use of this new double cradle frame. Something else you'll recognise as very Thundercat and even Thunder Ace are these fancy coloured brake calipers. Up at the front here we've got a pair of 4-pot calipers gripping 298mm discs, and they are fantastic, give incredible stopping power, believe me. And at the back, pretty basic, a twin-pot caliper hangs down at the bottom of a 245mm disc. Well, that's most of the boring bits out of the way. Let's go and find out what really matters. The Fazer is a very, very comfortable bike to ride. It's an easy bike to ride. Quite happy to be taken to the office and back 5 days a week, and equally happy giving the boy racers a run for their money along the twisty lanes. High handlebars and a decent sized seat encourage a fairly upright riding position. And with that comes an excellent view of all that's around you, be that traffic in the city or miles of rolling countryside. Power delivery is smooth and progressive from this gorgeous 600cc motor. Although I have to say that after a couple of hours in the saddle, there was a slightly annoying buzz coming through the foot pegs. A small price to pay, I suppose, for a motor that's as lively as this. So far, so good. But what about this fairing? There's no doubt in its effectiveness. It certainly keeps the wind blast off your chest and looks quite nice with a pair of twin headlamps up there. But I have heard people say, and I can kind of see why, that it looks like an afterthought, doesn't really look part of the bike. Because it's got all this space behind it, it looks like it's just been stuck on. Well, you make your own mind up about that, but for what it's worth, I think it looks great. And I'll tell you something else that's good, and that's this bit, the pillion department, because these rear foot pegs are actually low enough to give your rider a reasonable amount of comfort, to stop him getting that horrible pain in the back of your knees that you get from layers and layers of folded leather. And the seat, as I say, comfy. It's wide enough for you to cover a fair few miles without having to have too many coffee stops. And you can take your key out, plonk it in the little hole there, and the seat comes off to reveal a compartment underneath. Not very big, you might just about get a small U-lock, certainly a disc lock in there, and maybe a pair of very, very thin waterproofs, but not much else. And if you want to enjoy the Fazer at its best, you really don't want to be carrying much else. Flicking it up and down the clunk-free 6-speed box is an absolute joy. Winding it up along the lanes and throwing it into corners is what this bike is all about. It's not got enough raw power to get you really excited. It won't exactly rip your arms out of the sockets, but there's more than enough to get you into serious trouble if you don't show it some respect. All the talk about the Fazer when it became available in early '98 was, will it be as good as the Suzuki Bandit? Will it outsell the Bandit? And what about the Honda Hornet? Well, I have to say I think it's very unfair to compare this to just those two, because this does so much more. And at just under £5,000 on the road, I think there's one or two sports bikes that might just be in for a little shock.